Glad to see all of you this morning. How many of you had a good night's rest? Good. How many of you had breakfast this morning? That's wonderful. We got great people here, and all the hard questions they get, all the extremely hard questions Evelyn gets, and then I'm just going to laugh at them, all right? Okay, Wizard.
Pastor, it's been talked about that couples should have daily devotions together. Could you elaborate a little bit on suggestions you have for how to do that effectively as a couple?
Do we want Brother Wilkerson to answer this?
Yes, sir. It's up to
Go
you.
ahead. Wizard, we need you.
Testing, okay. I don't think probably that Linda and I are probably the best example of this particular thing as far as having personal devotions together always. It's something we have not done every single day. We certainly try to pray daily together, and we try to talk about the things of God. Our schedules are challenging at this stage of our life, and it's not something we even have all the time to do that. So I don't know, Pastor Sexton, if I would be very good to be able to tell you that we do this on a strategic level. I try to do it with our children.
You're telling them.
But I think probably...
I already knew you didn't pray and read the Bible, so I just want...
Just want me to confess it publicly? Is going to embarrass me in front of my new friends here?
Let's see if Roger can tell us anything about what he does. Go right ahead.
I don't know that I am any better than Brother Wilkerson. Except I'm going to say this, and I do understand Brother Wilkerson's statement about scheduling and one thing or another. And even though my wife and I have retired from the active pastor, we still are very active in our schedule. And to pray together and things of that nature, I think is important as you can do it. But I'll be very honest with you, and this is a personal belief of mine, that number one, if you try to have a committed devotional life together, the devil's going to disrupt it where one day without it is going to be 2 days without it, and then next thing you know, you're going to look at it the week and you haven't done it. And my preference is this, is to make sure that I keep my personal daily devotion up. And if my wife does that on her side, we're staying in step with the things of the Lord and staying in step with one another. And what that raises in our life is this. It brings us to discussions on occasions is what we have found in our daily devotions and reading the Bible or how God spoke to our heart. And then it's over breakfast or lunch or whatever we're doing, or even getting in a car and traveling somewhere, we begin to talk about what we have received within our own daily devotion. So I really think that we're living in a busy time, whether you're in the pastorate or evangelism that my wife and I have turned into, or whether you work an 8 to 4 or an 8 to 5 job, whatever it is, we're busy, busy people. And if I keep my personal life up, she keeps her personal life up, then our devotional life is in step with each other.
When our children were at home, that helped with discipline. And Evelyn had this idea, and I'm sure many of you heard me share it with you, and it happened, that we would get up in the morning, this is every day's business, and we would get everything ready. Our children had to make up their beds in the room, clean up the room, the whole 9 yards. And then we were ready to go a half an hour before we had to leave. That was the schedule we put ourselves on, and it worked. And we read a chapter of the Bible and prayed together as a family. And that's what people do. And honestly, the problem with all of us sitting up here is we want to be truthful with you. And we know what you want to hear, but we want to be truthful with you. And when we were having our children at home, this was the routine. There's 1,189 chapters in the Bible. And so we read a chapter a day. If it was a long chapter, we'd take 2 days reading it. If it's a short chapter, take maybe 2 a day. No comment. I tried to preach, especially when we're having trouble with the kids or something was going wrong. And Evelyn would give me that look and put the quietus on all of that. And then we had we'd pray around, and we had the time set aside to do that. It helped us with lots of things. It's like going to college. You don't learn what you ought to learn in college, but you learn discipline. And that's the big thing. And so we were a disciplined family to do that. Then at night, we read Bible stories, those things you see put out by Seventh-day Adventist in the doctor's office. We had all those volumes, and we'd read one of them every night when the kids were little in their room and pray with them. And one night we were so tired, Evelyn was praying. We were kneeling beside the bed of our youngest son, and she started praying, Lord, we thank you for this food we're about to eat. And Matt jumped straight up out of the bed and said, you're going to eat me tonight. But, it just, those kind of things happen. And then at a certain time in their life, I don't know when it was, maybe when they were in junior high school, we stopped reading the Bible stories at night. We started praying with them still. But we still prayed with them at night, opened the day and closed the day. And then we asked that they start reading the Bible for themselves. Now, they had the Bible in the room, but we never checked to see if they were doing that. But their Bibles were there. We encouraged it. And you either become self-disciplined or you don't, and you can help people do that. But we continued that Bible reading, morning Bible reading, the whole time they were at home. My son is here, and he knows that, and both of my boys do the same thing with their children, I understand. I'm very happy about that. But we read every chapter in the Bible, every verse in the Bible, many times, because about a little over 3 years, you go through it and then start over again. That was all her idea. I would never have done it, because the kind of person I am, I want to get up in the morning and get at it as quickly as possible. I've already got a list of things in my brain to get done, and just like a cannonball out of a cannon. I just want to get at it. That's just my personality. But she disciplined our family to do that. Now, Evelyn and I have had a harder time with the same thing. And we do read the Bible together and pray, and we pray one another. One of the habits we have, and I don't know if I should tell you this or not, but since both Adam and Eve were naked and alone in the garden and there was nothing between them, you might as well know. But this may weird you out what I'm about to say. Anyway, that was one of the great lessons for me. Especially the state of mind I'm in. I don't know if I'm in left brain or right brain, but the medication from the surgery's in one side. I don't know which side. But anyway, we wake up every morning, 7 days a week, about the same time. It's about a 5:30 thing. And our routine is to get up before 6 and that type of thing. It's just part of it. And we go to bed about 11 o'clock at night. And but we lay in the bed in the morning and talk for 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes. And that's a very good time for us. And it's always very encouraging. We've made a rule in our home late at night, we never talk about serious things. And we just don't. And if one of us starts, the other cautions, look, we're not going to get into that tonight. We have to sleep. I think what I'm saying is, whether it's the Word of God, you're a student of the Word of God, or you're having personal devotions, Dr. Robertson had a habit of every night getting beside his bed with his wife, kneeling beside the bed and praying. And they would read a chapter of the Bible at the end of the day. Now, he lost his short-term memory several years before he died. And so Mrs. Robertson would tell us that sometimes he would tell her we didn't read the Bible and pray. And they had. But just not to upset him, she'd get out of the bed again. And they'd kneel beside the bed and pray. But he made that disciplined part of his life. Now, you can do that with meaning or without meaning. But it's developing a devotional life, I think, is the important thing, not the devotions and habitual, but devotional life. I think all of us wish we were better examples. But the example we want to give you is that we're trying to be honest with you. And we've started and stopped and started and stopped and started and stopped. chided ourselves and started and stopped. And I imagine that's a testimony of everybody up here. But we're always starting again, trying to do better. And because you've asked this question and there's nothing between us, we're going to try to do better again. When we leave here, we're going to try to do better again. Would you try to do better too?
Absolutely.
Would you try to do better?
Yes, sir, I would.
I appreciate it. Now,
I just want to say this. Brother Clarence is weirding me out.
Pastor, how do you make extra time for your spouse, especially with busy schedules and several children in the home?
well, we have no children in the home. Now, they have a children's home, but they could probably tell you. And Grandpa and Grandma here, they've got the most beautiful heritage of any preacher I know. And I know their kids and grandkids, and what a wonderful, wonderful thing they've got. And Brother John and Linda, they've got an absolutely beautiful family. We have 2 boys and 6 grandkids. Look, the things that make us happy in life is pleasing the Lord. I don't like to see Evelyn upset. She doesn't like to see me upset. And to see our children serve the Lord from their heart, and our grandchildren truly have a love for the Lord. My oldest grandson, Shannon Christie's son, outstanding boy. They've done a great job with their kids. And he's going to get married. He's engaged to be married in June. And he has the finest things to talk about. The other day, one of my grandchildren, Matt's oldest son, was with me at home, and I was feeling terrible. And we were sitting at the kitchen together, and I had my head down on the bar. Wasn't feeling well. And it was later at night, and I was about ready to go to bed. And I said to him, Andrew, I don't feel good. I just don't feel good. And just keep praying for me. And he reached over and put his hand on my hand. And he said, well, let's just pray. And he started praying for me, thanking God for the day and for health and life, and praying for me and praying for my rest, and then asking God to guide him. Look, that's what means something in life. I couldn't tell you how many people I had in Sunday school last week or the week before or the week before. Couldn't even tell you exactly what the offering was. And people get so stupid in God's work. They just get so stupid. And they get stupid because they're full of pride. We all are. And you're trying to impress somebody. But the only things that really matter are your happiness with the Lord and happiness with your family, and answering your critics with a good conscience. So take care of that. And I think from the next 2 or 3 questions, only the women should have to talk. Microphones.
It's about time, isn't it, girls? He is still drugged out of his mind. I want you to know that. So some of these things he said, he isn't taking any medication. It's just from being put to sleep. It takes him 3 months to get over that. So I'm teasing.
It's been mentioned that husbands and wives ought to be willing to accept reproof from their spouse. What is the best way to approach your spouse to give them that reproof?
Well, I think timing is an essence to bombard my spouse when he comes in the door with issues that I'm heavy-hearted about is not good timing. There's a time and a place. Never when he's hungry or irritated. But of course, there are times that I can cushion it too, to kind of like the sandwich principle. If there's something that I see, we live together, we see each other's flaws, and if there's something that I see that he would really want to be aware of or know that it could be hurtful, or he would really want to know, but really there's a way to encourage and tell him he's good at this, and this, but maybe this is an area that we could both work on, and then after that, lots more praise, but kind of sandwich it in.
Is that what you're doing?
But I think that's something that we've done.
I agree. Well, what I always say is, I have absolutely no problem being submissive to my husband, as long as it's what I want to do. I tell my Sunday school class that all the time. However, it is very difficult to accept reproof from my husband because both of us are very strong-willed. And lots of times during the day, he will reprove something that I've done. And the old man just wants to say, well, forget you. You know, I'm going to do this. But I tell my class that there has never been one time that I haven't accepted his reproval and been happy that I did. But there's been lots of times when I was rebellious against it and regretted it. It's very difficult to be reproved. It's very difficult to be corrected as a woman or as a man, I think. He has as big a problem with it as I do. Sometimes he's more gracious in accepting it than I am. But I think that has a lot to do with personality. And I try. I think it's like these ladies and I have lots in common. And I think it's hard sometimes to be reproved by your husband. But we just try to accept it, and we know that it helps us. It always helps us.
You know, public people have a problem of believing their own press. And if we didn't have these wives, there's no telling how wicked we'd be, how far off the beam we'd be, how far off course. Evelyn doesn't mind telling me anything that needs to be straightened out. And she tries to choose the right place. Typically, 9/10% of the time, it's in a private place, in a car we're going somewhere, or when we're all alone. I think she respects the Lord's work so that she wouldn't embarrass herself and the Lord's work in public. But, I mean, we get it. I mean, we get it, and we get talked to. I mean, and if we don't, there's something wrong with the wife. I mean, that's an assignment God's given her. And I am too plain spoken. My brother has 2 girls. My sister has 2 girls. My other sister has 2 girls. I have 2 boys. And my brother says to me all the time, you've raised boys. You could never have raised girls. They'd be crying night and day, you know, and because just too straightforward with things. And he's right. He's right. And that's a problem. Overreacting has been my besetting sin. And I'm hoping that what I've been through recently will moderate some of that in my life. Praying that it will. Praying that it will. But old dogs have real hard times with old habits. But I got a great wife. I would not be in this room today talking to you about anything because you wouldn't want to listen to me if God hadn't used her the way He's used her to keep me in line. And it's a gift. Reproof is a gift. It's one of the things God's Word does. And that means it's one of the things God does to tell us where we're wrong. Let's go to the next women's question.
Do you have any counsel for couples that both husband and wife must work outside the home?
I have not worked outside the home. My husband swung a hammer on the side, so I didn't have to work outside the home. I did some things like keep kids and hang some wallpaper and clean the church and things like that to make a little extra money. Taught school 1 year. But I do watch young couples struggling with this. And we have been staying the last month with our son who pastors in Florida, and I've watched them. She's taught the last 2 weeks that they were there, share the responsibilities so well. I was proud of Titus because, you know, one day he happened to be at home and Emily was gone, and he straightened up the house and did the laundry. And I tell my boys, because I raised sons, when your children are little, your wife needs you more than any other time. Don't expect her affection if you're not affectionate to her in that regard. If you don't show your love by the way that you help her, so it's really it takes balance and it takes prioritizing. You have to leave some things undone that maybe you would like to do a better job at, and not sweat the small stuff and work as a team at it. Is my best advice.
Well, sometimes too, you have to live on a less income, what everyone else is getting, because it's a two-family income, a two-person income. You're wanting those things, so it pushes you to have to work. But to live simply and be able to stay home with those babies and have the best investment in their lives, those pre-years that you're able to discipline and love and care for them is so important. I watched other people's children so that I could be home and watch our children as well. I felt like I was getting paid watching my kids, getting the laundry done, getting food on the table. There was still income coming in. And I think it really honors your husband when you are a hard worker, and you can contribute if you're able. But trying to be creative. I've ironed shirts for people where I'm able to be at home. But things like that, I think it works for us.
When my husband was in seminary at Tennessee Temple, I did work. I was the secretary to the business manager. And our boys were both in school, but it was something God allowed me to do at that time in our life. And it was good for me then because I would have felt so alienated from my husband. I became part of the ministry there at Tennessee Temple. I became involved in it and was able to do the things I needed to do at home. It was difficult. On Saturdays, I'd cook enough meals to last all week because I didn't get home until late. And we had a meeting at least once a month, a week meeting, when we were there at Tennessee Temple under Dr. Robertson's leadership. But I felt like that was God's will for my life then. And I feel like I would have been more miserable had I been at home and not been a part of that ministry while we were there. God leads in every area and every aspect of your life. And it was just God's will for me to work at that time, to be involved in the ministry. It was more taxing on your marriage, but I felt that it helped our marriage for me to work because he was head of the bus ministry. He was an assistant pastor. He was involved in everything. And I feel like if I had been home just having gone to a new ministry, it would have been very difficult for me. So, sometimes you wives that are working don't think that's a forever thing. And sometimes it is an absolute necessity that you work. Now, these other two women were always allowed to stay at home with their children, and that's absolutely wonderful. But you heard both of them say that they took care of other children. They did other things to try to help. And both of them had larger families than we did. And I think God leads. And if you are here this morning and you're a wife and you have to work, don't think it's a permanent thing. It's maybe just for a short parenthesis. And maybe God's trying to teach you something outside the home. Don't be discouraged. Always be supportive of your husband. And my husband didn't take a second job, so I had to work.
Well, do you know, I was working for Dr. Robertson, and I don't want to embarrass him because I think he's the greatest man I ever knew. But I was an assistant pastor at the Highland Park Baptist Church in charge of all the evangelism, in charge of the Sunday school, and we were averaging over 9,000 in Sunday school and running 62 bus routes. And I was paid $2 an hour. And I got paid for 40 hours, but we worked about 80 hours a week. Then I got a raise to $3 an hour. My wife was employed as a business manager. Now, if I had it to do all over, I would have paid them to let me work there because it was the greatest experience of my life. How many pastors are here? Would you raise your hands? We have a tendency, not just pastors, we have a tendency to try to override the consciences of other people and the autonomy of another person's family. And the way we speak as pastors, we should not infringe upon that. It's not your business to try to run somebody else's conscience or to run somebody else's home. And the way you say things should be said in a way that they have an opportunity to respond to yea or nay. Your power is influence, not demand, not making people. That's your power is influence. But someone may be feeling guilty about having to work and kids. Look, when I started in the ministry in 1967, 80% of mothers and wives were at home. 8 out of 10 were at home. Today, nearly 90% are out of the home. So people like myself have had to really think through things like this. And there were some problems, lots of things great about women at home, But one of the things that went on during that time too was women didn't have opportunity. They didn't get an education. There's more women in college today than there are men. And I know pastors who don't believe women should get an education. They don't even want them to finish high school, much less ever go to college. So girls have had a hard time being prejudiced against. And we have to have the right attitude toward it. Dr. Faulkner's wife always worked. He met her when she was a teacher at Bob Jones University. He was a dance studio instructor. And God called him to preach. And he was the greatest assistant pastor that ever lived, in my opinion. I've studied that a lot. But Dr. Faulkner had 5 sons. And Dr. Faulkner taught us things about what he did at home with an apron on, helping cook, helping clean the house, helping make the beds, helping wash the dishes, helping clean up after every meal. Now, you know, that's not manly enough for some men, but really it's about the most manly thing I ever heard of. And I said in conferences many times, the most manly thing I do at home is make up the bed every morning. And I haven't been able to do that for a while. But this woman has sacrificed her life. She and I went to high school together. She was smarter than I am. We had classes together. She was in the top 10% of the graduating class. I don't know where I was. I mean, honestly, about 280 something down the list. But every dream she had, she gave to the Lord and gave me her life. Now, honestly, think about that. And I should have been a better husband and all of that. But if you're, as she said, if you're working and you're trying to make it work and you're trying to make the family go, don't get on a guilt trip. My mother, by herself, raised 4 children, and I never resented her working. She had no education. She worked as a restaurant waitress, and she worked in a fruit market. And I never resented her working because I knew she was doing it for the right reason. We were all pulling together. And that's big stuff. I appreciate what you said, honey. God bless you.
This is for all 3 couples. Where did you spend your honeymoon? And if you go anywhere, where would you like to visit?
We didn't have a honeymoon.
We didn't have a honeymoon.
We had a honeymoon. That's why we have 9 children. Yeah. We got married in New England, and Linda's from Massachusetts, so we got married in New England. I had planned a place in Missouri that we were going to stay for a couple days, but really did not have enough money to do much between that time. But thank God for wedding gifts. And so we worked out a few things there, and we traveled down the eastern seaboard, cut across, saw my mom and dad there in Knoxville, Tennessee for a few days, came up here to Gatlinburg just on a day trip, and walked up and down these streets, and then made our way to Missouri, and then went back home and got back to work.
If you could go anywhere, where would you like to go today?
The Lord has given me the opportunity to travel a lot internationally. And I have told my wife many a time that the one place in all the world that I would love to take her would be to Switzerland. There's just, pardon me? I've been there many times, but I can't get on a plane. She'd have to be drunk to get over there.
Well, Brother Wilkerson can get her drunk for you if you want. We'd do that for him, wouldn't we? I mean, for the Lord. My wife and I got married very young. She had been 17 for 2 months, and we were in love. We'd been in high school together. I knew her since she was 13. I asked her mother one night when I was out at their house. Her mother raised her. Her father was a Baptist preacher. I said, I want to marry Evelyn. And she said, well, And her mother raised her because her father was killed in an automobile accident when she was 5 years old. He was a Baptist preacher in Sevier County. They were from Maryville, Blount County. And I said to her mother, want to marry? And I said, I want to marry her tomorrow. And there's no rush about it. She said, have you prayed about it? I said, well, I've thought a lot about it. I think I have, but I'll go do that now. So I came back in about less than an hour and said, I really believe it's for you. God wants. And I've been thinking about it for a while. So, I mean, this is what I tell all the kids when they're coming to me for counseling. And so anyway, just kidding. But anyway, so she said, I think it's wonderful. So it was February the 14th. We'd planned around getting married on February the 14th. And so anyway, we drove to Bryson City, North Carolina. That's where a lot of people, any of you ever got married in Bryson City, North Carolina? Too young for that. Anyway, it's one of those things where you could go and get married the same day and that type of thing. So we drove over here, got the blood test. I fainted when they gave me the blood test. Literally passed out. So anyway, they said, now you got to go see the fellow who's the judge. And we went in and gave him the information. And he looked at Evelyn and said, oh, sweetie, you've got to get your mother to sign. You're so young. And we didn't know that. So we drove back home and told her mother, said, we didn't get married today. We're going to try again tomorrow. So that night, I changed her driver's license 1 year. It was just a paper driver's license. Came back to Bryson City, North Carolina, same man, same place. And I gave him the driver's license. And he looked at me and looked at her and said, oh, I see you're old enough today. And he married us. Now that's soon to be 48 years ago. But you know, kids back then were so much more mature.
Keep telling yourself that.
So we went back to school the next day for our honeymoon. So then when school got out, we went to Florida to see my mother. And that was a great thing. My mother loved Evelyn. We've had a wonderful journey. I'm saying all this nonsense because, you know, everybody gets the idea it has to be exactly, oh, we went to California, or we went to Hawaii, or we went, and then you got everybody on a guilt trip because they didn't, you know, how stupid, just stupid. And if you've got $50 and you can go to the best place in someplace, fine. Enjoy your life. I think too much money is spent on weddings. And the wedding ceremony is more important to people than the marriage. I mean, if somebody could start a movement that we've got a $199 wedding deal and we're going to buy washing machines and other things with all this other money, and you know, and we're all just going to have peanuts and a sheet cake and punch. If people start doing that, you know, people be a whole lot better off. I mean, honestly, don't you think there's some correlation between more people getting divorced than ever before in the history of America? And weddings are bigger and bigger and bigger than they've ever been before. They're putting more emphasis on how it all looks than what it all is. What do you think, preacher?
I think you ought to tell us what you think. No, I agree with you. We have talked about not having a honeymoon, and honest to goodness, it wouldn't have made a bit of difference because I wasn't marrying her to go on a trip. I was marrying her to live with her for life because I loved her, and I still love her. And but you know, as time unraveled and has given to us an extension of life in this world, God has allowed us to have a honeymoon. And that's not just verbiage, that's the truth. We've lived that, and it's been wonderful. Yeah.
My parents cashed in an insurance policy for $180, and that's what we got married on. That provided my wedding. My sister-in-law made my dress for $20, and it's all worked out just fine.
And you know what's wrong with most churches today? They don't have older people in them who are teaching marriage couples to say the things that kids need to hear, and it's just young people telling other young people what they think ought to be done. The contemporary church is missing gray hair, and it's terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. I'm not against the young. I thank God for them, but it's wonderful. What these people are saying is wonderful. You don't want to do what I did, honestly, but what they're saying is wonderful. And don't put one another on a guilt trip. I mean, honestly, why a question like this? All of you are married, aren't you? You want to go on a honeymoon? We've been on one for nearly 48 years, and we've traveled all over this world and stayed in the nicest places and done the nicest things. And the greatest friend I've got's right beside me, and I'd rather be with her than anybody anywhere in the whole wide world at my house, So, hey, get a life.
One final question. Do each of you have some word of counsel or advice about the dealing of finances in the Christian home?
I said last night you have to deal with lust, and I haven't done the best job of that. Probably everybody ought to take a course in that. We have our kids in college do that. You have to agree about things. I started tithing my income when I was 18 years old. I didn't know anything about tithing. Her mother said, "You want to be blessed of God? I want my daughter to be married to somebody that's God's blessing. And I want you to tithe your income every week." Her mother. And she said, "Now this is how you do that." She said, I cook in a school cafeteria. I own my own house. I own my own car. I don't owe anybody anything, anywhere. I've raised 2 children. My husband died when they were young because God has taken care of me. And I want you to learn how to allow God to take care of you. It was wonderful. She's 92, be 93 soon. She can be overbearing, but from time to time, but good night. She's lived all these years. She's got something to say. Somebody said, "Do y'all live close?" She's about 10 feet from me, and she lives in our house. And but that's this stage in life. I'm sure either of these men could tell you more about it and do a better job. But my point in this is honor God, tithe your income. You may disagree with me. I look at the New Testament church as the storehouse. The 10th belongs to God there, and then you give offerings beyond that. And I've tried to support everything that we're doing and lead the way and that kind of thing. I hope you'll do that. Probably half of you don't tithe. And you're robbing your God. You're robbing your family of blessing.
Yes.
You're robbing your church of what you should be doing. I'm a pastor. I know these kind of things. Yeah. And if you just left here and began to tithe and put God's priority on your income, that'd be the best financial advice I could give you.
There are 4 major causes of divorce. Now, there's a lot of reasons people get divorced, but there's 4 major causes of divorce. I'm going to give them to you in the order of which they occur: money, religion, in-laws, and sexual attitudes. Those are the 4 major causes of divorce.
You want to write that down?
And money being number 1. In today's economy, you'd think it would be kind of reverse of that. That would be the sexual attitude of society. When it isn't, it's actually money. People living above their means. People getting married thinking they have to have what their mother and father have. Well, they haven't stopped to think that it's taken 35, 40 years of them to accumulate all that stuff. And you stay married that long, and you'll wind up that stuff too. So you need to live within your means. And I agree completely with Dr. Sexton. The first debt, and it is a debt, it's a bill, you owe it, and that is the tithe that belongs to the Lord. And regardless of whether you put it in the Old Testament, New Testament, Malachi is still true. that we're to give our tithe and our offerings. And there's a promise attached with that. And that is we have the protection of God upon our life. He will care for us. It's a defense mode. And it's just simply giving God honor and due. But, before a man, this is a biblical principle, before a man's built a house, he's sit down and count the cost. Know what your income is and live within that income. Years ago, there used to be a sign, and this will really date me, but there used to be a company called Montgomery Wards. I guess there's still somewhere around. I don't know where they're at, but anyway, they had a sign on the door. And that sign on the door said, "Like it, charge it." And we picked up on that mentality just to lay a piece of plastic out, not counting the reality that you're going to get a bill at the end of the month. And they're going to want their money with interest. With interest. So know what your income is and live within that income.
I would just say that that this is a huge, huge responsibility, and it's certainly a major issue. Everybody thinks about money before 9 o'clock every morning. If you've been up an hour, you think about it. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor, if you're a man or a woman, a young person or an old person. And I think it has to be done. God speaks a lot about finances in the Bible, and I'll just echo what we just heard. But I think there's three things that come to my mind. Number one, I remember my mom I was sitting on a counter. My mom's here today. My dad was such a great man in so many areas. This was not his strength. Finances was not his strong suit. And I remember him making a decision, and I was 14, and I said to my mom, I said, "Mom, why isn't Dad doing this, or why did he do that?" And I remember her looking at me. I was sitting on the counter. Shouldn't have been sitting on the counter, but she said, "John, I want you to listen to me. So your dad is a great man. He loves you. He loves me. And he's so good, and I want you to be like him in so many areas. But this is one area that you need to think through the Scriptures, and I want you to be better than your dad in this area." And I remember that like it was yesterday, 14 years old. My mom said, "John, you better figure this one out. It'll complicate your life if you don't." And that really challenged me to go to the Scriptures, especially the book of Proverbs, and begin to thinking about that and to find people who had a biblical view on finances. But there's three things that come to my mind. Number one, work diligently. God rewards hardworking people. He always chose hardworking people to do work for Him. And the harder you work, the luckier you'll get. And you're not going to build a successful strength on spare time and pocket change. It's going to take sweat, blood, tears, and hard discipline. And so hard work diligently. Number two, Linda touched on a minute ago, but is to live simply. And Dr. Green just spoke about that. It's but to live within your means. And, if you have the itch for more, and covetousness is condemned in the Bible, but God wants us to live within our means and be content with such things as we have. Want what you have, not what you don't have. And that's very challenging. It doesn't matter if you're from a poor background or rich background, it's still a problem. Some of the biggest problems with poor people is covetousness. And the itch for more, same is true with the rich. Someone asked John D. Rockefeller, "What would you like? What else do you want more in life?" He said, "I want one more dollar." One more dollar. There's an itch there. But live simply. That means thrift stores instead of Macy's. It may mean that you've got to analyze what you can do, and that's something that I'm very appreciative of Linda. She's very frugal and very helps us that way, and I need her. And then I think the last thing is to give generously. And give generously. This is something that God is helping me with, but I do believe the tithe is what we owe, and if you steal from God, it's really dumb to steal, but it's even more dumb to steal from someone that can watch you steal, And He knows how much He gave you. He knows how much you're supposed to give back to Him. And then for you to take it that's sad. And I think that we need to get our tithes what we owe, but our offerings are what we sow. God grows your tithe as He gives you more, but you and I can grow our giving. We can grow our giving to world evangelism. And that's the only money we'll ever see again. And Jesus said, lay up for yourselves. He didn't say lay up for me, not lay up for your church. He said lay up for you, treasures in heaven. And I think we ought to be aggressive about giving in those areas. I think God rewards that.
You know, it's amazing to me. You know, I pray about who to have here, and I am so impressed with these couples. So impressed. And I really believe that what they have shared, even just now, and what they've said in this meeting, I just pray that somehow or another God will multiply this. We'll put this online so they can get this information. But these kind of meetings need to go on other places, and at this juncture, it's not a lot of fluff. Practical things, helpful things like this. And I know Brenda's daddy was a great man, just went to be with the Lord. And I've heard Roger talk about his mother so much. She was a great woman and helped him. I think she was not a complicated woman in like the world, but she was a great mother. Linda influenced. Evelyn's mother is a simple lady, but she's a great woman. My mother raised 4 children. She was tougher than nails on some things. She's only 5 feet tall, weighed 100 pounds. My father never had a chance. Died young. But the point I'm trying to make to you is you must get it so you can help other people get it. John's mother was the rock of Gibraltar in that family, and all those boys serving the Lord. Miss Coleman, I want you to stand there just a second, will you please? And Jim, stand there with her, and they're married now. This is John's mother. Let's give her a hand. She's a great lady. Great lady. And they're members of the church I have the privilege of pastoring, and let me tell you, there are not 2 better members in our entire church. And in everything, they're out there for all of it. God bless them. This is it. We must teach others also. The hurt and harm and heartache that's going on can be stopped if you get it and pass it on to the next generation.
You know, I don't want to capitalize the time here. I'm just one of the people here, but through the years I've had so many people sit before me with problems, and most generally it's finances. The one thing that we don't correlate with finances is that it's spiritual. And it is spiritual. You have a financial problem, it's a spiritual problem, because you are living independent of biblical principle. And anytime you withdraw yourself from biblical principle, you're in error. And you're not going to go right, you're going to go wrong. And one of the things I've had couples, and not necessarily just young people, people of all ages, talk about this. Well, her check and my check. When you're a married couple, there's no such thing as yours and mine. The only thing that is yours and mine is I don't wear her dresses. Now, I help pick them out and things of that nature, but when it comes to the issues of life and our marriage and finances and things of that nature, it is ours. It is ours. We sit down, we work with it. We know what we can do, what we cannot do, what we have to say no to. And you know, some of the best shopping you will ever have in life is at 10 o'clock at night with a Sears Roebuck catalog. That way you're liable not to spend what you don't have. And it's just such a crucial thing. And as a result of it, we live high on the hog, but we wind up eating dirt. And we need to be very, very careful, because everything is linked to that. Everything. I mean, you get to think about your life. Every issue of life is connected to a dollar sign somehow. Somehow. I mean, just, and excuse me, preacher, but it's just such an important thing. just so important. So.
I'm telling you. How many of you have separate bank accounts? Don't raise your hand. And she's got her deal, and excuse me, you've got your deal, and she's got her deal, and fuss about whose deal is what, and that was my money, and you're stupid, and you know, and you're driving yourself crazy, and teaching your children how to be dumber than you are, and you see what I mean? The man is right on target. My wife's granddaddy, his favorite expression was, plain talk is easily understood. Plain talk is easily understood. This whole country is imploding this way. These are the last of the Joseph years. The famine is coming. Everybody knows it. The famine is coming. You're going to have a garage sale and sell all your excess stuff and not spend the money. But I believe that all the people have honored God and have invested in souls, in their offerings, and world evangelism and missions legitimately, not just through some smoke screen. God's going to take care of them. And I don't even know how, but God's going to take care of them.
You know, preacher, and that's a subject that I've had to deal with so many times, but let me ask you this question. What thing is more important than the person you married? I've got to have this. I've got to have this. So-and-so bought this. I've got to have one like it. Well, can you afford it? Is it going to better your life? And here's what I have seen over and over again, and I'm going to tell you something. I don't know how many is in this room, but there's quite a few. And probably more than likely, there's a situation somewhere here today where you have worked yourself into a corner. The husband's working 2 jobs, the wife was working 2 jobs. You're never home, and when you do get home, you're worn out, you're exhausted, you can't communicate, you just want to go to bed to get rest. And you repeat the same thing the next day to pay for what you bought, instead of investing your life within the person that God gave you. And it's not worth it. It just is not worth it. I've seen more and more people walk away from one another because of things than just about anything else I know of.
I just want to say, if you lined our sons up and asked them about the happiest years of their growing up, it was our poorest days. Mm-hmm. To their dying day, they will reminisce about those days as the most fun and the most memorable, and they were the most difficult financially.
And the thing about it is, they didn't know we were poor. That was the part about it. We never discussed that. They didn't know it. We just wanted them to enjoy each other and the family and home. We lived simply. And throughout my marriage and raising our children, even to this day, I always made sure I had a day off. Now, I know preachers don't, but they're wrong, and I'm being very clear on that. Every preacher needs a day off, and you need a day off designed to be with your family. Mm-hmm. Not to preach to them, not to sit down and have a 3-hour devotion. Do something. Go fishing, play golf, putt, take them out to McDonald's and whatever. But you need to have that day off. And after our boys grew up and finally left the house, the only thing I found out about kids leaving home is come up with more. And it's wonderful. We love it. But I still, after our boys all left the house, Friday was our day off. Always our day off. And if I had a funeral or a wedding or something that disrupted that, I always gave another day to my wife and to my children. And when I pastored for 44 years, and my staff would come walking down the hall, I made sure that they all had a day off, every one of them. And if I saw them wandering through the halls or someplace and I knew it was their day off, we had an appointment. because the home is at stake. The family is at stake. See, I want my ministry to be a positive to my children, not a negative. I want to invest into their life.
Amen.
And that's just, I'm very strong and adamant about that. And I've had people disagree with me and even get mad when I mention it. But you'll get over it.
Well, I want to personally thank both of you men and your wives. The fact is, we want to be exemplary. We're not exemplary in every area. But I want to thank you, and it's been a blessing listening to you. And we're praying for you. And look, rejoice in what you have. Don't be whining about what you don't have. And just thank God that we can be here together. It's a precious thing. And Evelyn and I love you, and we're praying for you. And we love these folks, and we've enjoyed being with you. Thank you so much. And Scott, you've done an outstanding job. Outstanding. Made a great wizard and anything else too. All right? Come and tell us what we need to do. Thank you.